Hello, hello, Kristoffer. Can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you.
Hey, hello. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Not too bad, not too bad. Thank you for making a little bit of time today. I'm very keen to have a little chat with you. It's mainly for the Sustainable Development Master students. This is about Greenland today, and as we all know, the energy transition requires a lot of metals, and there is a lot of mining in Sweden, but there's also a lot of opposition to mining in Sweden. A lot of people feel that mining is not very clean affair and are therefore opposed to mining. We have large mining companies operating in northern Sweden, but attempts to mine in southern Sweden haven't really taken fruit in any large quantity. So there is this issue about where to get all these metals from. Some companies that are leaving Europe are going to Africa or the southern hemisphere in the wider sense, or South America. But there's one enormous place that has a lot of resources, and not a lot of people think of it in a permanent way. So I wanted to chat with you about this, and that is, of course, Greenland. And Greenland is associated with Denmark, so you are the person to talk to. Let me quickly introduce you. Kristoffer, you are associate professor in Copenhagen at the university, and you specialized on Greenland geology and on resources coming from there. So yeah, Greenland. Tell me a little bit about Greenland. How big is it actually? I mean, it's quite a vast place, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the world's biggest island.
Yeah, whoa.
If if you want, I can share a small presentation I have here.
I was hoping you would offer that. Thank
So
you. Yes, please go
it's
ahead.
always easier with a bit of context. So I hope you see this.
Yes, I can see
So
it.
just just a bit of on the history of Greenland is tied to Denmark. So I mean, basically, Greenland was a former Danish colony and became more and more integrated to Denmark, basically the kingdom of Denmark, together with the Faroe Islands and also previously Iceland. And basically, the sentiment now is that they want to move more and more towards becoming an independent country, and that's
Sure.
sort of been done over time. And so, the last change is to what we term self-rule. That they have a lot of saying on internal matters. Foreign policy is still dictated by Denmark as part of the kingdom, but actually resource management is something that's on the hands in Greenland now. Yeah, so when we talk about future mining potential in Greenland, then that's all coming from the Greenland self-rule government, basically. And also, if we're just looking at the sheer size of Greenland, so it's the world's largest island, as mentioned. It's a large area, but it's actually covered by ice. I think something like currently, 80% or so, but that number is, of course, decreasing with the climate change, which is, of course, also one of the reasons why we're interested in mining for the future, because it's sort of the foundation for the green transition is these mineral resources. So big island, small population, so it's actually has the lowest population density in the world, and you could say that's actually a benefit for mining. Traditionally, it needs land. The less people are around, the less impact it'll have on local populations, basically. So
Yes, I can see that.
some people consider Greenland like the final frontier in terms of mining, simply because it's vast and sparsely populated.
Very good. Yeah, no, I can see that to be an advantage in the sense that it doesn't impact communities and large population centers. And you can actually also you have the space to develop operational aspects that allow a rather kind of clean operation, I think. And because it's in the northern hemisphere, we would think, and also under Danish legislation, we would also think that mining would be as clean as possible then, of course.
Better regulation, basically.
Exactly.
But one drawback, though, is that it's so remote in general. So logistically, you have to sort of plan everything from scratch and invest in infrastructure as well. But then another positive side is that everything is basically along the coast, so it makes it possible to ship ores to refine elsewhere. So there are some pluses and minuses in all of this.
Yes, that's a key issue. I mean, the transport is, of course, an issue. You need to get there, and also that you need infrastructure. We also have a lecture on space resources, and there it's also you need to
Yeah,
think about
logistically,
building
it's
something.
also a problem.
It's almost, yeah, it's frontier resources, as
Yeah.
you say. I mean, submarine or very remote Arctic regions, or space for that sake. These
Mhm.
are frontier resources, and but maybe that's actually something to consider very seriously, given the vast amounts of metals that are obviously required
Yeah, because
for our green technology ambitions. And now, let me quickly ask you, what would we actually find on Greenland? What are the metals or resources that we could possibly get? I know that vast amounts, here we go, vast amounts of the island are of course covered in ice, but we get good ideas from the coastal exposures. And yeah, run us through those, please,
yeah, I
Kristoffer.
mean, pretty much any mineral, any element you can think of, Greenland has it. As I mentioned, it's the biggest island and has a very long and complex geological history. So there's actually everything, as I show here, from diamond and ruby deposits, gemstones to gold, and also these the rare earth elements. These are in high abundance, especially in South Greenland. Some huge deposits. The world's second largest deposit is located there. And basically any metal in between. So it's both traditional metals, base metals, but also these critical metals used for the green energy transition. So
Wow. Yeah, this, yeah, exactly. I was looking for a map now. Fantastic. You're well prepared. Thank you so much.
yeah, no
So,
worries.
yeah, let's have a look at these rare earths first, because obviously we
Sure.
need them desperately
Yeah.
for renewable energy production. And this is something we have so little of in Europe in general. Most of it, as most people know, comes from China at the moment. So having a resource in Europe or accessible to Europe would be a vast step forward, I think. So where
Yes.
are these rare earth elements from, or where
So
can you find them?
this diagram is a bit too busy maybe, but in general, so South Greenland is sort of the major rare earth element province. That's something that's known as the Garder province, English province. So that's Mesoproterozoic age. So around 1.2 billion years ago, there was a rifting situation, basically like in the Oslo region. There was also a rift situation there, kind of similar in South Greenland, and that basically reactivated a lot of deep-seated enriched mantle rocks that are hyperalkaline, so very rich in alkaline elements, but also rare earth elements and what we call high field strength elements like hafnium, neodymium, and zirconium. So a lot of these rare and critical metals are present in South Greenland. As I mentioned, this is actually the world's second largest deposit. So it's something that really would make an impact to have it developed. But then there's a lot of sort of political problems in developing this. We can talk more about that.
But yeah, no, this would be important. But of course, I mean, yeah, that's a tricky one. We have a little carbonatite complex in Sweden, which also happens to be on a beautiful little place on the island of Alner. And of course, there has been considerations. Should we consider mining this, or should we protect the beauty, the natural beauty of this? So I think the conversations must be very similar about this.
Yeah.
But let's just play with the thought for a few minutes if we wanted to exploit this. The position is actually more advantageous here because south of Greenland is much better developed than the north of Greenland, I would think. And also the travel distances are not quite as big. So if we wanted to exploit that, what would we need to do?
Yeah, I mean, basically the deposits are right on the fjord, so basically accessible by boats and larger ships. So, I mean, if you wanted, you could actually, depending on how much processing you want to do on site, you could actually ship the ores or materials to either Canada or the US for processing. So it could be done completely independently of China. So the problem, of course, is this balance about the social license to operate. The local population needs to be on board, and also the environmental impact it should have. So in general, Arctic environments are more fragile than elsewhere. So this is something that really could certainly needs to be considered, and especially also because rare earth deposits in general are associated with uranium and thorium. So those could be some serious byproducts, or depending on if they're actually used as a resource and mined out, then it's easier to handle. But if they're left behind in tailings, they could become a serious environmental problem. So there's
I see, yeah.
lot of things to consider.
Yes, I think my gut feeling would be a mining or quarrying the material there would be very possible, but yeah, processing it there might not be the best of ideas because that would have a huge impact. While there is processing facilities elsewhere, we would add transport costs then, of course, but I think at least we would leave behind only a quarry rather than the potentially toxic impact of processing. So that's very interesting. One more question about the rare earth. When you mentioned the local population, and of course we know the local population would be is comparatively small. But how is the sentiment there by the local population? Is there generally a pro-mining sentiment in terms of that they look forward to the jobs, or is this more an anti-mining sentiment? Do you know much about this? Could you comment on that?
So from my own experience talking to locals, and also from what's in the literature, basically, then the general population is in favor of mining, partly because they want to seek independence in the future, and that's clearly, I mean, at the moment it's fisheries, that's the main income. They see in the future tourism, of course, can be developed further, but also mining would be an important part in the economy of an independent Greenland. So in general, they are pro mining, but it of course needs to be done in a environmentally sustainable way, and that also doesn't clash with fisheries, because that's kind of the main income at the moment. So that's important to consider.
Yes, I don't know much about fisheries. Is there a lot of fishing going on in southern Greenland? I would assume so, now
I
that you
think
mention it.
yes, yeah. I mean, especially along the whole south to up through the west coast, that's mostly ice free the whole year. So there's a lot of fishing going on there.
That's of course an issue. I mean, I know that in Scotland, for example, there's some super quarries, as some people call them, these very large quarries that they are remote. They're only kind of accessible from the sea, and therefore not a lot of people will ever get there. Not a lot of hikers will see these quarries, and they operate quite successfully. And they would have mainly a local impact. And but if fisheries are in the area, then yeah, that needs to be carefully considered, I assume. But let's talk a little bit about other resources. What about some kind of base metals, some simple things? In Sweden, one of the big things is, of course, iron, and there's also copper. And copper is an element that we will need for all sorts of electronics. Iron is, of course, the biggest mined metal resource in the world. We need it from making cars to bridges to making steel and having, you know, large buildings with steel enforced concrete and things like that. So could Greenland contribute to these large amounts of simple metals that we need as well?
So I mean, there is one occurrence of high grade iron. So these so-called banded iron formations, the same style as found in Australia. So that's at this famous almost like a World Heritage Site for early Earth geology, the Isua supercrustal belts near Nuuk. So there's some large deposit there. But I mean, again, comparing the logistical challenges, then it wouldn't compare to the deposits in Australia. So it's kind of, it's there, but it probably doesn't make sense from an economic point of view to develop an iron mine there. Other major metals would be maybe aluminium. Could be something that's actually an active mine for an anthracite, which is a mineral that contains aluminium. They're actually using this mostly, I think, for fiberglass production. And there's one more mine on the way near Fiskeneset. They're also developing some very high quality anthracite for fiberglass, but those could potentially also be used for aluminium production in sort of a green aluminium sense, that you don't have all the waste products that you do with normal sources like bauxite for aluminium.
That's very interesting you mentioned that. I know that Iceland has several aluminium smelters, and they're getting bauxite from India and places like that shipped up, because the energy in Iceland is very cheap because it's geothermal and a lot of hydropower because of the melting glaciers. A side effect of climate change. But that's interesting. So maybe there could be some thought about processing it.
Yeah, that would
For
make a lot of
example,
sense.
in Iceland, where energy is actually very affordable, and then the transport routes would be not as big.
Hmm.
Okay, fantastic. What about kind of some of these very critical metals? I mean, we need a lot of cobalt, nickel, and things like that for making batteries and other applications. Does Greenland offer an alternative there?
Not so much in terms of you mentioned copper. There are a few showings. Cobalt also a few showings, but nothing major, I would say.
Okay.
Nickel, there's one deposit in particular in near the village of Manitsoq. There's a Archean age nickel sulfide deposit there, which could be of fairly high quality. But again, there's these logistical challenges. Maybe again, it's Australia is again one of the big players in terms of nickel sulfides, and also maybe Norway is developing some deposits there. So yeah, I guess that it's a matter of if you want nickel sulfides or just nickel from laterites. That's also a big environmental issue at the moment, or the nickel coming from Indonesia, for instance, that they need to clear out forests to get to the soil, and then you kind of deplete the soils in locally. So it might be better to source nickel from sulfide deposits like in Scandinavia and Greenland as well.
Yeah. It might be, at least for now, but I mean, of course, some of the considerations that we're currently having is that we may need a lot more than we think in the long run, depending also on how technology develops, how our markets develop, how we actually have battery technology going in the future. So there may be certain metals that we need more of, and others that we think we need a lot of may not be quite as bad in terms of supply. Of course, these changes are there, but yeah, let's consider that a little more. What about other metals? I mean, gold, platinum group metals. They're of course very important for chemical applications, for inert production, inert items, also in medical applications. And there I see on your map on the right, there's a few places. There's one on the right here with platinum and gold. Tell me a little bit more about that, please.
Yeah, I mean, so gold is one of these things that it's probably the easiest to get funded for these greenfield exploration projects. So I think something like half the 50% of the budget for exploration goes into gold specifically. So there's one big deposit actually right next to the capital Nuuk on the island of Story. The problem there is that it's associated with arsenopyrite, and it's right where the most people in Greenland are living, and it's tens of kilometers from there. So it would arsenopyrite, of course, you don't want arsenic in the fjord that people go on their weekends to go fishing and everything. So I think that project is pretty much dead. But in South Greenland, there has actually been a mine operating done by known as Nalunak. So a company is actually currently trying to reestablish this mine for some these quartz hosted gold. So that's something that might actually open this year or next year, a new gold mine there.
Okay, wow, that's very exciting. There is this one place that I always wanted to visit, never had a chance to go there, but that's the Skaergaard intrusion.
Yes.
And I think you mentioned that you might have some slides on that. Could I trouble you to show us something on the Skaergaard? And this is an old volcano. It's actually a tertiary volcano.
Let me just jump to it here.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for being so flexible, Kristoffer.
No problem. If I can find a good slide here. Yeah, so I mean, Skaergaard is one of these world famous places for us geologists, at least. So it's of course we should talk about this. So do you see my slide here?
Yes, I do. Yes.
Yeah, so Skaergaard would be the intrusion right here. So it's part of actually the current Iceland mantle plume. So it actually Greenland moved across the plume. So there's some volcanism on the island of Disco that's important as well. These picritic lavas, and then basically it migrated across. And then on the east coast, the expression was again lavas, but also these deep intrusions. So Skaergaard is one of these intrusions, and I can show a more detailed figure here. If you see this.
Yes, absolutely. Oh, yes, that's exactly what I was after. So, tell us a little more about this, because there we have this one horizon that that seems to be the magic place for getting some of these really expensive metals.
Yeah, so I mean, it's one of these classic intrusions considered to be just a magma chamber that was left to fractionate in sort of the classical sense, and then sort of in these large drops of melt, then you get this sandwich horizon where you then concentrate everything that was mobile in the last drops of liquid, and you end up having these platinum group element and gold horizons. And it's actually something that's been known for a very long time, and it's been explored for. And again, there seems to be some recent developments that this might actually come into production eventually. It's a very significant gold and especially palladium deposit.
Yes,
So
I see. So, and logistically, I mean, it's in eastern Greenland, so, and it's pretty close to the coast. So, of course,
yeah,
infrastructure would be needed, but that's quite feasible, I understand.
yeah. I mean, even though it's not always ice free all the year round, it's still possible to do mining operations locally, and especially with there's quick access to Iceland for processing of all materials as needed. So that's also makes it a bit more viable. So
That
I think
sounds,
it's one of these things that just depends on fluctuations in the demand and the price for
and the
gold
price,
and
yes.
platinum. And
That
especially
sounds,
platinum is important for catalysis. So that's also even whatever technologies we're going to develop, we're going to need catalysis in the future for biofuel, for production of it and combustion of it. So PGs, platinum group elements, that's certainly something that's going to be in high demand in the future.
that's what I think, and this is a crucial kind of component that we will need in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Now, for the last few minutes, let me maybe quickly come back to the rare earth elements, because they seem to be one of the major opportunities when we think about mining Greenland.
Mm-hmm.
And they are, of course, also one of the major issues that Europe is facing in terms of supply, because, well, something like 95% of it is currently coming from China, and it creates a dependency that is not always strategically wise. And therefore, I think this is the kind of thing. Could you potentially bring us very briefly to the Garder province? I
Yeah, I
think,
had a couple of slides at the end. I'll
yes, I
just
think you had
jump straight
something
to that.
there.
So yeah, I could actually just mention you talked about nickel. There's a big showing
Sure.
on also associated with Skaergaard. So we had Skaergaard on sort of the east coast here. Then on the west coast, there's the Disco Island area, and there's some big anomalies. I'm not even sure if it's magnetic or what kind of anomalies they're looking at, but people have been talking about these for ages, and that's something that might be drilled in the near future. So that could potentially be these Norilsk style magma conduits with the massive nickel ores. So that's also something to look out for in the future.
Yes, that's very useful. These are nickel sulfides, and I
Yes.
know that I've been part of an expedition to Arctic Canada. We've been looking for them quite desperately.
Mm-hmm.
So we found some pointers, but we never found the magic deposit. So Disco would actually be
It could be this
quite a
one.
lot easier, exactly.
Yes.
But yeah, let's focus for a few minutes on the rare earth before
Yeah.
we wrap
So
up. But yeah, go ahead.
I mentioned the Garder province. So it's actually two different events. So there's this early Garder and late Garder event. But basically, what we're talking about here is mainly the Ili intrusion. So I can just actually also just a small side story is that there's the first mine in Greenland was this up at the Ivitsut, kind of two different spellings, but they had a mineral called
Cryolite,
cryolite.
yeah.
So that was essential for production of aluminium. So during the Second World War, it was very critical for the Americans to have access to this cryolite for production of the aluminium that went into airplanes. So there was actually a major strategic point of interest for the Americans. And this is actually also one of the longest operating mines, or the longest operating mine in Greenland. And it was basically completely mined out. And so now the problem is not access to cryolite, because we can make it synthetically. So it's we kind of solved this problem. But it's part of this Garder province of these very weird alkaline magmas that I mentioned. We
Mm-hmm.
just jump to this map here that also shows it quite well that so this is showing niobium anomalies from stream sediments, and you clearly see there's these big anomalies over here and here. This is where the so-called Illimauser intrusion is. And so down here, there's a sketch showing sort of this is a big magma body of very unusual composition. And I could also show this. There's a long list of weird minerals containing zirconium and also uranium, thorium, of course, and these high field strength elements, hafnium and niobium. So a lot of very strange minerals that in some cases, actually, this is the only place in the world where they are found in abundance, and the first site for discovery of these minerals. So it's just an area with mineralogically it's extremely interesting. And so the intrusion here, so this is again the Illimauser intrusion. There's a sort of an upper and a lower, and they basically represent the upper magma chamber and the lower magma chamber. You can see out here we have these layered so-called corticoids. So that's these type of layers here. That's this lower part here, and the importance of the lower and upper part is that the upper part contains uranium. Basically, that was mobile. It's kind of rose to the roof zone. So whereas the lower part doesn't have uranium, and this has become sort of a political hot potato that the self-government of Greenland have recently implemented a law that mineral deposits with I think it's kind of the arbitrary limit of 100 ppm of uranium are not allowed to be exploited. And so there was this company that has been investing in the upper part, the so-called Kvanefjeld deposit, for more than a decade and done a lot of drilling and exploration on this. And suddenly a new law is implemented that they're not allowed to proceed with mining of this. Wow. And so that's again one of these things. Mining companies, they are looking at very long-term investments, so they want to have sort of a stable political landscape to navigate in. And yeah, it's kind of a big conflict at the moment to see where this goes, if this can be developed or not. But of course, this all starts with the local population, the social license to operate, as we mentioned. That if the locals are not on board, then it doesn't matter how much money you throw at a project. It's simply not going to happen unless you can convince people that it actually makes sense. And again, it's one of these problems that people don't want to mine in the backyards. So it's easy to outsource it to some third world country where we don't see it.
And where social licenses are actually not even asked for.
They're not asked.
Exactly. That's the big problem, and this is actually bringing us to a close of our little chat here. I mean, yes, because in the Northern Hemisphere, at least, there is a debate and discussion about these things, and certain areas are in need of protection. Others may be useful resources that can be exploited. But in many other parts of the world, this is not a topic even, and I guess this is where it becomes crucial. So what's your personal opinion, if you don't mind me asking, at the very end? Do you think southern Greenland is the place to go for rare earth element mining in the future? Or yeah,
I mean, it depends on how much we want these metals, right, and how much we want to be independent from China. I mean, it's the second largest deposit on Earth for these metals, so it would make a lot of sense to utilize these resources. So it's not for me to say if they should be utilized or not, but it's basically a major roadblock in the green energy transition. So I think it becomes very political at some point. If are we gonna force through this green transition, then we're gonna need a lot more mines than we have now, and also mines in places where we normally wouldn't accept having mines. So it really becomes a sort of this huge dilemma of, do we want to combat the climate crisis by implementing a lot of green energy technologies? They all start with a mine. So that's something I think also from a political point of view that people need to start by realizing that everything starts with a mine pit somewhere on Earth. It might be your local backyard, or it might be in a country you never heard about. But people need to have this realization about the green energy transition.
Yeah, it's important you mentioned that, and I have a master's student right now. She's very interested in this, and she has actually contacted you, I understand, and
yes,
hopefully we'll have a chat with you about this as well. And this is a really odd dilemma that while on the one side people are generally in favor of renewable energies, green transition, etc. But at the same time, the consequences that would arise from that, i.e. the mining, meets a lot of opposition. So it's hard to fully understand because it's trying to go left and right at the same time in a way, or backwards and forwards, however you want to orient yourself. So and this is counterproductive. Strangely enough, there is no simple reconciliation, and the interesting thing is how people can actually, you know, hold these opposing views at the same time. It's something I find very fascinating. And I'm also not saying this has to be this way or that way. It's more about how do we actually deal with these things, and having this deposit is, of course, up our sleeve in our backyard, in inverted commas, is of course a major asset, and this is very important. Okay, well, I think that brings us to the end. Thank you for this very brief but very detailed, yet at the same time very detailed introduction to Greenland resources and the potential of mining rare earth, but also aluminium, nickel, and other components, and gold, of course, as well. So this was very interesting, this introduction to frontier resources on Greenland. Kristoffer, thank you very much for your time.
You're very welcome.
Okay, then I say all the best, and talk again very soon. Bye-bye.
Take care.